Yo, what's up everyone? My name is Emerald, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you the current best settings that you should be using on Black Ops 6 and Warzone in Season 3. It has been a while since I made a setting video on this game. There were a few things that did change over time, so I wanted to make a new video based off of those updates and what is currently the best settings in the game at the moment. Now, some of these settings are going to be personal preference, so for example, not everyone's going to be using the same sensitivity, the same button layout, or the same input, or the same audio settings, etc. So yeah, just keep that in mind. But anyways, starting off with the controller settings, most of these settings are personal preference. It really depends on what controller you're using and what sensitivity you like to use and what button layout you like to use. Like for example, I like to use tactical flip because I would prefer to slide and dive with the right joystick other than the circle button. And I more prefer to have my bumpers and trigger buttons swapped because I would prefer to aim and shoot with my bumpers instead of my triggers. Now for the sensitivity, I currently have mine set to 3.20. If you remember my previous setting video, you probably noticed that the numbers on the sensitivity bar were actually different. So for example, instead of seeing 3.20, you would see a single number. So setting up your sensitivity, you would set it to 5577. I think I had mine set to 12, I think. But then sometime later, they decided to change it to this, which I don't know why they did that, but okay. But anyways, to find your perfect sensitivity, you want to go into a game, you want to max out your sensitivity, and then as you play the game, just slowly keep turning down your sensitivity until you find a sweet spot. After Activision changed the numbers on the sensitivity, I had to do all this over again, but yeah, I find that 3.20 for me is the sweet spot. I know it's a bit high, but I have a control freak on my right joystick. I use the tall Infernos, but yeah, if I took this control freak off, then yes, this would be way too high for me. But yeah, since I use a control freak, it's perfectly fine for me. Anyway, scrolling down here, you want to make sure your controller vibration and trigger effects are turned off. Now for the dead zones, it can be a little bit difficult at first to understand, but basically what you want to do is you want to turn this on, and it basically shows on the right side a grid of both of your joysticks. So if you look at my left joystick, the red dot in the middle is the minimum and the red outline out here is the maximum. And what you want to do is you want to move your joystick around and let go. And then you can see that your joystick is glitching out or moving all over the place. You want to make sure that your minimum is the lowest it can possibly go without it stick drifting all over the place. So if you don't know what stick drift is, it's basically where if you move your joysticks and then you let go, it just starts moving by itself. Either because the joystick has a piece of dust in it that's causing it to drift, or it's just an old joystick that's been used for so long, it's just starting to wear out. Whatever the case is, you want to make sure that this is the lowest it can possibly go without it stick drifting. Moving on to the aiming tab, on the sensitivity multiplier, I have mine set to default. On the advanced aiming settings, I have my ADS transaction timing set to gradual. For the aim response curve, I highly recommend you use dynamic. On the movement tab, I have my sprint assist set to on at 0 delay. Mantle and crouch assist, I don't recommend having this turned on, so I would turn this off. Slide and dive behavior, I recommend you use slide only or hybrid. The tap to slide and tap to dive options has a small delay in it, so I don't recommend using these if you're trying to play competitively. Parachute automatic behavior, I have this turned off because I would prefer to use my parachute manually by pressing the X button. Sprint restore and slide maintain sprint, I recommend having these on. On the movement advanced settings, I have my sprint and tack behavior set to toggle. On the combat tab, going down to the armor plate behavior, set this to apply 1. I think apply all is set by default. I might be wrong, but if it is, I don't know why they would do something like that. But yeah, I highly recommend setting it to apply 1. On the combat advanced settings, I have my interact and reload behavior set to prioritize interact, so that way I can pick up items easily. I also have my akimbo behavior set to pair, so that way I can press one of the fire buttons and it shoots both guns at the same time. Moving on to the graphics tab, on display mode, I recommend you either use exclusive or borderless. For the longest time, I've been told that exclusive is the best option because it gives you a little bit more FPS and less latency. But the issue with exclusive is that every time you try to tab out, it'll minimize the whole game and you have to click into the game again. I've tried exclusive and borderless. I didn't really see any performance difference in my opinion. I don't know if it's more of a placebo effect or something like that, but full screen borderless does let you tab without the game minimizing, so that's why I'm using borderless. Now if you use full screen exclusive, these two options will be unlocked. I highly recommend you set your refresh rate to the maximum possible. I also recommend you set your display resolution to the maximum it can possibly output. For me, I have a 1440p monitor with a 165 Hz refresh rate, so this is the maximum resolution and refresh rate I can use. Now if you're on full screen borderless, these two options will actually be locked, and they will instead input the maximum display resolution and refresh rate your monitor is currently outputting. So whatever resolution and refresh rate your monitor is outputting based off of your Windows settings, that's what is going to show in game. Now, gamma and brightness, if you click on here, you can see this bar right here. You can increase and decrease the brightness of the game if you want. I currently have it back set to default because I don't want it any brighter than this. Now, NVIDIA low latency, it really depends on the hardware of your computer. What you want to do is you want to go here to the telemetry tab and you want to turn on the processor CPU time and the graphics card time. Now, after you turn these on, you want to go into the game and you want to play the game, but you also want to keep an eye on this. If you notice that your GPU has less milliseconds than your CPU, then you want to set your low latency to on. But if your CPU has less milliseconds than your GPU, then you want to set this to on plus boost. Now, for the eco mode, I have to set the custom. Make sure you turn all VSyncs off. I have my custom frame rate set to unlimited. I highly recommend you set your frame cap to unlimited because the more frames you have, the more fresher of an image your monitor will display, basically reducing latency. But if you still want to cap your frames, then what I recommend you do is you set your frame cap 10 frames higher than your actual refresh rate. This will keep your frames above your monitor's refresh rate, preventing it from going under your refresh rate, or at least not as often. But for me, I'm going to keep it at unlimited. Reduce menu render resolution, I would recommend keeping this at native. Pause game resolution, I do not recommend ever turning this on. Reduce quality when inactive, this is really based on your system. Focus mode, I recommend you keep this at 0 because if you increase this, basically the game is decreasing the brightness of all your other monitors, so that way you can focus in the game, hence the name focus mode, which is, in my opinion, pretty stupid. So I would recommend keeping this at 0. HDR, I recommend you keep it off. Moving on to the quality tab, you want to make sure that you're on the custom preset. Make sure that your render resolution is at 100%. Dynamic resolution, I recommend you keep this off. Upscaling and sharpening, I recommend you use Fidelity Cast. Frame generation, please keep this off. This will definitely give you a lot more latency. VRAM skill target, I currently have mine set to 70. I've heard that if you increase or decrease this, it's supposed to give you more performance, but I don't really know if that's true or not. I recommend you go into a game and keep changing the setting until you find a good number that gives you the highest frames. Variable refresh rating, I highly recommend you turn this on. So for details and textures, you basically want to set everything at the lowest setting. I've heard people say that turning this up to high will basically make your game look a little bit more better and it doesn't really impact your frames as much, but I don't know if that's really true or not, so I like to keep mine at low. I also have my bullet impacts turned on so that way I can see the bullet holes in the wall. And I also make sure that my on-demand texture streaming is at the lowest it can possibly go. Because if you have this set to optimize, or if you have this set to any higher than it is right now, it basically uses more internet, which is not good. So you always want to make sure that this is at the lowest settings possible. You also want to make sure that download limits are turned on. And then once you scroll down, you want to make sure that all of these settings down here are at the lowest setting. Moving on to the view tab, going to the FOV, this one kind of confused me a little bit. For the past couple weeks, I noticed that the FOV slider in multiplayer is different than the FOV slider in Warzone. I didn't really know why at first, but then I noticed that when I play Warzone, the FOV, I don't know why they changed it like this, but apparently the FOV in Warzone is a little bit more zoomed in than it is in multiplayer. Honestly, I don't know why they changed it like that, but anyways. Basically what you want to do is you want to go into a game. You want to increase your FOV high enough so you can see more of your surroundings, but you don't want to increase it too much because it makes faraway targets a little bit more harder to see. So you want to balance it between how much of your surroundings you want to see and how easy you want to be able to see a target from far away. For me in multiplayer, I find that 110 is the best sweet spot for me, so that way I'm able to see a good chunk of my surroundings and also see far away enemies easy. And on Warzone, I like to run 115 FOV because like I said, Warzone's FOV is a little bit more zoomed in, so to compensate that, I had to increase my FOV by 5, but this is mainly personal preference. ADS field of view, I have mine set to affected. Weapon and vehicle field of view, I recommend setting both of these to wide. World and weapon motion blur, please turn this off. You don't need motion blur. You really don't. Camera movement, I recommend you set both of these to 50%. Inverted flash is personal preference. If you don't like getting flashbang with a white screen, you can turn this on and you'll get flashbang with a black screen instead. Oh, and also, once you get done setting up your quality tab, you want to go back to display and restart your shaders. So you want to press this button right here, press the restart button. And then once you do that, you want to quit the game, then relaunch the game, and it should generate fresh new shaders. Moving on to the audio tab, I highly recommend you turn your gameplay and cinematic music all the way down. I also recommend you keep your effects volume at 100%. The dialogue volume is basically the voices of the characters and the operator in the game. So you want to turn this volume down to where you can still hear them, but they're not as loud, so that way you can hear crucial audio cues like footsteps and whatever. And I also recommend you turn your master game volume down. I've seen a lot of content creators and streamers set this all the way up. Please don't do that. Just please don't. The game is loud enough as it is already. But I think the main reason why a lot of content creators and streamers have this at 100% is because they're using a custom audio mixer like I am. For me, I'm using SteelSeries Sonar. This is the current audio mixer I'm using. I currently don't have an XLR. I wish I did add an XLR, but yeah, this is currently what I'm using. I don't like to run any custom EQs in any of these channels. As you can see, my game, my chat, my media, and everything, I don't use any custom EQs. The aux is where I listen to my Spotify, but if I go to the mic, this is where I start using the EQs. This is currently the custom EQs I'm using for whenever I'm talking to people on Discord or whenever I'm talking to people in game chat. I don't like using this virtual mic on OBS because it increases latency, and I really do not like it when my microphone is delayed on OBS. So yeah, whatever you're hearing right now, this is not the custom EQ I'm showing off. This is actually the raw input with OBS filters. But other than that, I do not use any custom EQs in game. I'm the type of gamer who prefers to learn the game sounds itself with whatever preset is built into the game. I do not think any custom EQ is worth it. If anything, I think it just makes the game sound even worse. But yeah, I do not recommend using custom EQs. Enhanced headphone mode, I personally have this off. I heard that it does make your game sound a little bit more better, but I don't really know if that's true or not. I have tried this setting before. I really don't think this makes much of a difference, but if you want to try this out, then yeah, feel free to try this out. For the audio mix, I'm currently using Sucker Punch. I used to use headphone bass boost, but I heard that Sucker Punch makes your footsteps even louder. I'm still kind of testing that to see if that's true or not, but yeah, I'm currently using Sucker Punch. Reduce Tinus sound, I recommend you turn this on. And also voice chat, this is all really personal preference. You just set it up however you like, and yeah, we're good. Moving on to the interface settings on telemetry, this is personal preference. I like to have my FPS, server latency, and packet loss counter turned on. I didn't really change much in the color customization, but I did go to the squad member colors, and I made sure that the name tags on me and my squads are actually a little bit more brighter than usual. Like for example, the green name tag in the game, it's a little bit too dark for me, so I turned it up a little bit so that way I can see it. Now for the color filter, I personally don't use any color filters in this game. Basically, these color filters are more of a colorblind setting. Now filter 2 on the other hand, I don't really see much of a color difference in filter 2. If anything, it makes the game a little bit more vibrant. I have heard some people say to use filter 2 because it's supposed to make your game look better, but the reason why I don't use filter 2 is because if I were to put on a red camo, you can see that the camo looks perfectly fine, right? But then if I switch it to filter 2, if I look at the red camos, to me, it looks orange. I personally don't like it how it's changing the red colors and camos into orange, so that's why I don't use filter 2, but it's really personal preference in the end. Moving on to the gameplay HUD, you can obviously change the bounds of your HUD if you want to. For the minimap, I recommend using square instead of round. Compass type is personal preference. I personally use horizontal. Stamina bar, this is a new setting I didn't know existed until like a couple weeks ago. This is basically your tactical stamina bar. If you want to have this turned on, I recommend displaying it next to your health bar. Now moving on to the crosshair, this is a very crucial setting. So if you leave your crosshair on default, then basically what happens is when you go to move around and jump all over the place, you can see that your crosshair is like moving side to side, bouncing all over the place. Leaving it on default makes it hard for you to center your opponents. So what you want to do is you want to set it to static. And now you can see that your crosshair is not moving side to side, it's not bouncing all over the place when you're jumping, it's staying dead center in your monitor. I've seen a lot of people use center dot, but the reason why I don't use center dot is because, oh frick, you can't see it in the freaking firing range. The reason why I don't like using center dot is because the very moment you press the ADS button, it immediately disappears. Now, it might not be much of a big deal if you're just red gunning, but if you like sniping like I do, this is definitely a disadvantage. Now, if you set it on static, on the other hand, now if I press the ADS button, instead of it disappearing immediately, it just slowly fades away, which is more than enough to help you center, especially if you're sniping. Now, crosshair color is personal preference, but you want to set it to a color that allows allows you to see the crosshair the most. If I had to give recommendations on what colors to use, I recommend you use either green or cyan. Me personally, I'm currently rocking the green color, so I'm going to set it back to that. But ultimately, it's really personal preference. And yeah, that's basically about it. But anyways, let me know in the comments down below, what are your thoughts on the settings I just gave you, and if they actually did help you get a few extra frames in game. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're brand new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And also, make sure to follow me on Twitch in the link in the description below. I'm trying my best to get back into live streaming, so yeah, make sure to follow me to catch me live. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone.